Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Our webinar will begin shortly, but while we wait, we'd love to see where you're tuning in from across the globe. Thank you, Ray Standard from Jacksonville, Florida, for kicking us off today. We encourage you to ask questions of our speaker today. However, as you can see, the chat moves really quickly, so please be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A tab located at the bottom of your screen right next to resources, and we will answer those questions at the Q&A session after today's session is over. Again, welcome. Good day, and hello everyone. Welcome back to our event called HRCI Insights. These are episodes that provide insights on current HR services, developments, and technologies. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. This is an interactive session. Definitely check out the chat, talk amongst yourselves, let us know where you're tuning in from. And the chat's also a great way for you to expand your professional network and to learn from each other. We just ask that you kindly limit your LinkedIn profile shares to 2 times so we can carry on the conversation. And also, please make sure you keep all comments professional and respectful. Any bad actors will be ejected. And then again, friendly reminder, if you have any questions for today's speaker, please use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Also, we want HRCI Insights to be accessible to everyone, so we have closed captioning running. If you do not need this resource, please click on Show Captions across the bottom of your screen, and then choose Caption Options to hide subtitles. If you are new to HRCI, we welcome you. If you're a returning attendee, we are so happy to see you again. We are honored that all of you have joined us today, and we always encourage you to bring a friend next time, whether they are certified or not. My name is Megan Hayes. I'm the Director of Corporate Sponsorships here at HRCI. Today's topic is the manager multiplier, why the smartest bet in HR is on leaders, not perks. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome back Deborah Squires, who will take over from here. Deborah, we're so happy to see you again.
Thanks so much, Megan. It's wonderful to be back. Thanks for having me. Give me just a second to get set up. Today's topic is the manager multiplier, why the smartest bet in HR is on leaders, not perks. I am Deborah Squires. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Bonusly, and in my role here, I get to work with prospects and customers on their initiatives to make work better. So it's my pleasure to share with you some key concepts around how to ensure that your managers can have the biggest impact on your workplace possible. I like to start with a story so that we don't just jump into concepts, but we can all share a story that we, I think, can probably all relate to very closely these days. So I'll start by setting this up and sharing. I'll be talking about a fictional company named Mailcork. Mailcork is a marketing platform. So it's a SaaS business. It's a distributed workforce. They do have some hubs where people can go into the office, but it's very much a relaxed hybrid setting. They have a very small HR team. That probably is near and dear to all of your hearts. That typically is the story in every company. You're often understaffed and have lots to do with the team. So completely appreciate that. As I mentioned, Mailcork is a hybrid company. They have locations across the globe and employees distributed primarily in North America, but with remote locations and a few regional hubs. I want to introduce you to Bob. Bob is a marketing manager at Mailcork, and he has been on board with Mailcork for about a year. Bob is at the center of some of the most exciting marketing campaigns that the company runs, and he works consistently cross-functionally. So he's working with customer success and product and sales, and he executes programs with precision. He sits remotely, so he's not going into one of the hubs, and he really likes the people that he works with. He has the opportunity, as I mentioned, to work across departments. Given that he's been there for about a year, he's starting to notice that people try really hard, but sometimes there's just this lack of connectivity in the organization. And recently, he's become a little disillusioned. He's starting to feel like maybe his work isn't appreciated. There's not really a culture where people get shout outs or get recognition for their great work. His anniversary with the company was last month, and his manager didn't even mention it. They didn't announce it or celebrate it at the team meeting. So he's just starting to feel a little disconnected, but he loves the work. He knows everyone here tries really hard. So he's trying to maintain his motivation. And he is getting ready to work on his self-review. So he's spent a significant amount of time walking through all of his accomplishments over the last year. He's looked in Slack, in different PowerPoints and Word documents and reports that he's written. He's looked in all the systems in Confluence and Salesforce and Gainsight. He's put a lot of effort into preparing for his self-review, and in reflection, feels really proud of the work that he's accomplished over the last year and the impact that he's had. He's hit all of his deliverables or key initiatives, and he's hitting his KPIs. And importantly, his team is exceeding targets for bookings. So he feels really confident going into his review, and he has rated himself as exceeds expectations. Based on what he reviewed, he felt like he put the effort in not only throughout the year, but in preparing for this review. So he's excited to have this conversation with his manager. He's looking forward to how he can have even more impact at the company. He's thought through good questions to ask about how and where he can grow and have more impact. And now meet Sarah. Sarah is Bob's manager, and Sarah has 9 direct reports. Sarah has also her own responsibilities for hitting key metrics. So not only is she managing, she operates as kind of a player coach where she has individual responsibilities. Her team performs really well, and she's super proud of her team, but she feels really stretched very thin. And it is now time for performance review season. And while Bob had lots of time to focus on his individual self evaluation, Sarah is preparing for 9 reviews when she's trying to keep the bus running and all of the work that has to continue while this is going on in process. So she feels really stressed. Nonetheless, she's carved out a solid weekend to focus on all of the performance reviews. She's starting with Bob, who's been on board for about a year. And guess what she did in preparing for his performance review? She visited all the same documents and systems that Bob reviewed when he was preparing his self-review. So we now have Bob, who spent a good half day preparing for a self-review, and Sarah going through the same systems, trying to pull the same details out of those different systems in preparation for his review. In pulling together all that documentation, she noticed that she missed his anniversary last month, which makes her feel even worse about this process because she knows how important it is to recognize key milestones for her employees. So she's already down in the dumps, like trying to work on the review process, and realizes she missed a key opportunity to have Bob feel seen and valued. Nonetheless, she's got to complete his review and 8 others in the process. And so she's gone through all of the data, and she sees that he's met his metrics, he's hit key deliverables, but she doesn't see any empirical evidence that he's like a rock star. She's not gotten any feedback from the people that he works with, and if she wanted to reach out and talk to the people that he works with on a day-to-day basis, she wouldn't even know where to begin because she's got 8 other direct reports. They're all working on different projects. And so she does the best that she can with what she has in front of her and with the time that she has available to do this. And so, in the absence of additional evidence, she rates Bob a meets expectations because he's met all of his expectations for the review period. And, she finishes up his review and has to move on to the next ones. So, how do you think that review went between Sarah and Bob? Bob's walking in, having spent a half day on his self review, rating himself and exceeds expectations. And Sarah has spent a few hours putting his review together and has rated him a meets expectations. How engaged do you think Bob's going to be from here? And how do you think Sarah feels about this process and walking in to see how he rated himself compared to how she rated him and how that conversation is going to go? Yeah, unfortunately, the story of Sarah and Bob play out in workplaces all across the globe. day in and day out. This is not uncommon. And oftentimes these kinds of conversations and surprises at the performance review end up in your office or on your desk, because surprises in performance reviews and people feeling unvalued or not seen in that process don't go well. And they create escalations for HR teams. So this is something that has been going on in the workplace for not only years, but quite literally decades. Our tooling has changed a bit, and we have more places to go to look for evidence on how people have performed, but we continue to not do a great job with this process. And we're really at a point where, based on what's going on in the workplaces today, something really has to give. Employees are not happy, managers are not happy, companies are not achieving their full potential for performance. And it's a known challenge and has been talked about in the space for quite literally decades, with this being a problem. But let's zoom out a little bit. So we talked about the Sarah and Bob situation. The reality is, this has a significant economic impact. Gallup estimates that the lack of engagement and effective performance enablement in the workplace costs businesses $8.8 trillion annually. It's almost 10% of the global gross domestic product. That is a phenomenal impact. It has, people think about engagement and workplace issues as softer issues, but there's tangible economic impact from not doing this well. So let's zoom in a little bit and look at what is broken in this process. Well, we know that employee engagement has been plummeting over the last decade, and we've hit a low point at 31% of employees who are actively engaged. That's the lowest point in the last 10 years. We also know that managers are not engaged either. 67% of managers report being actively disengaged from work. So it's not surprising that employees are disengaged. And the data show that managers have a significant impact on employee engagement. In fact, 70% of employee engagement is directly related to the effectiveness of managers. But this is not a manager issue alone. It's not a people problem explicitly. It is a systemic problem. We have not set managers up for success. Now, I will grant you there are certain people who should not be managers. But in reality, if we look around, we have forced people into management as well. Upwards of 80% of managers ended up there not intentionally, but by circumstance. And it puts them in this situation where they're dealing with outdated tools that were meant for a different time in the workplace. Roles have become exceedingly more complex. So we not only give managers more individuals to manage, so we've expanded their span of control, but we've also had them retain their individual contributor responsibilities as well, and in many cases carry as much of an individual workload as any member of their team on top of the management responsibilities. In a complex work environment where there's rapid change and where many companies are asking people to do more with less and incorporate changes in the workforce, as well as organizational changes and changes in roles and responsibilities on their teams. So that is not easy in and of itself. And then we often don't train managers to manage effectively. So we drop them into a situation that is not ideal. We don't train them, and we expect them to use outdated tools and processes. And we're surprised when managers are disengaged. Actually, I don't think anybody on this call is surprised that managers are disengaged. But we definitely know we have a systemic issue, not just a people issue. So let's take a minute and just walk through what is broken about management as a function, not the people, but the actual function of management or role of management. One, visibility. Managers don't see the vast majority of the work product and the ways that their team members are working in most workplaces. If you reflect back on the example of Sarah and Bob, That is not an outrageous example. That is an example that many of us could look across our workplaces today and point to. The manager has a very limited view on the work that someone is doing on a day-to-day basis. And if you do not have systems that actually surface that on a regular basis, then managers are put at a disadvantage when it comes to not only providing performance feedback at the review process, but even helping individuals to set priorities and coaching and guiding them along the way. So when we make it hard for managers to see what's going on with their team members, we make it difficult for them to do their job. The second area is really a lack of connection. In fact, the Harvard Business Review is now referring to workplace loneliness in the sense of disconnectedness as an actual epidemic. 1 in 5 employees feels lonely and disconnected in the workplace, and that number is growing. And so it's a real challenge when people don't feel connected to their teammates, to the team that they work on, to their managers, to the company. And then you add to that the lack of visibility, and that provides this very unfavorable situation for not only managers, but team members to operate in. They're feeling siloed and disconnected from the rest of the team. It's hard to know what's going on in the business. It's hard to know when you're doing a good job yourself. The third area is in the manager and employee one-on-ones. This is the most canceled meeting in the workplace. And my hypothesis is because people are willing to cancel those because they're not getting enough value out of them. And it's such an untapped resource or opportunity for managers and their teams to connect, build relationship, provide coaching and guidance and reinforcement of the great work that the team member is doing. But when you approach one-on-ones in an unstructured way, or you orient too much around status updates, which don't have to be provided in a live synchronous setting, you start to diminish the value that people get out of that, and they start, not surprisingly, canceling those meetings because everybody has more work to do than they have time to do it in. And then finally, this all built into what happened with Sarah and Bob, the lack of visibility, the lack of sense of connectedness, which impacts trust and sense of relationship. And then the lack of ongoing feedback lead to surprises in the annual review process. Those reviews are riddled with recency bias. They are incomplete, inaccurate. They are anxiety inducing, not just for the employee, but also for the manager. Sarah wasn't feeling great going into nor coming out of that review with Bob, and she had 8 more to do after that. So we have been using outdated processes, outdated expectations, and outdated systems for decades. And it is all starting to build up and create cracks in the foundation of our workplace. Now, we know that there are problems in engagement in the workplace, but what is the impact of engagement? Um, Oftentimes, when you're talking about engagement with your leadership teams, people think of that as the softer side of the business. But the reality is, engagement has tangible business impact. High engagement is tied to decreased turnover, so higher employee retention, which leads to higher productivity, higher profitability, higher sales, higher performance. There is a direct linkage between employee engagement and building a culture of engagement built on the foundation of recognition and guidance between the manager and the team member that drives tangible business outcome and achieving and exceeding company targets. So my strong encouragement is definitely reflect back on this slide when you're having the engagement conversation with your managers and leaders in the workplace, to provide that ROI on the investments that you request to drive engagement, in investing in your teams and your managers. Now, it's time for a reset. So if anybody doesn't believe that it's time for a reset, I can't imagine that you would be on this session to begin with, but it's really past time for a reset. We have been talking about broken systems and antiquated processes, and lack of proper tooling for our teams for over a decade. And what has happened over the last 5 years has really caused the reality of the changing demands of the workforce to come to to become more visible to us. So historically, employees were focused on, what am I getting paid? How happy am I? Who am I working for directly? What's going on in the annual review? Let me put a development plan together so I can improve my weaknesses and close my gaps so that I can perform better. And really, we're focused on very different things. Now, over the last 5 years, we've endured quite a bit. We have endured and survived a global pandemic and lockdown that had people come to terms with like the impending sense of doom and the existential crisis that we were facing. It had them really call into question what's important to them. And you saw more demand for flexibility. You saw people realizing that you don't have to do things the way that they've always been done. We proved overnight that you could go from in office to fully remote and still maintain effectiveness. I'm not saying it was easy overnight, but we did prove that it was possible. And now what you're seeing is a real fundamental shift in the demographics in the workforce. We now have 5 full generations in the workplace. Gen Z is over a quarter of the workforce today. And you see baby boomers who are starting to leave the workforce, but you do have 5 full generations in the workplace, all with different demands and expectations. So what we're seeing now and into the future is that people are requiring a commitment and a connection to the company purpose, the company vision, and company values. They want to know how they're going to grow and develop as professionals, not just focused on their job today, but where does this lead me in my career? Who's going to invest in me? What is my manager going to do to help me bring out the best in myself and be my best professional? Who's going to take the time to share with me what I'm doing well and where I can improve? And are they going to provide that feedback to me frequently enough that I can actually have impact on not only my performance, but also my growth? Are they going to recognize and pull forth my strengths, which, when I use them on a regular basis, drive higher engagement? And then, do they care about me as a human, as a person? Do they care about my life and what's important to me? And so, not only have the demographics of the workforce changed, the realities that we've gone through as a society over the last few years have really had us reevaluate and recommit to different priorities as a workforce. And so this is the challenge that we're facing in the workplace today. So let's step back and think about what teams actually need, and then we'll talk about what managers need. And how do you bring this together in a way that has you have positive impact on your team member engagement and satisfaction and performance? So teams need purpose. They need to understand not only what the company is about and what the values are, but they need to feel connected to those values and goals and see how they have impact on the business. They they need passion. They need to know that when they show up, it matters, not only for what the work that they produce or the outcomes that they deliver, but also for their unique humanness and what they bring as an individual to the workplace. And they need real relationships at work. Remember, if you reflect back to my earlier comment about the sense of loneliness and loneliness being an epidemic in the workplace now, this is a measure that we didn't used to track, and we're now tracking it on a regular basis. People want to feel connected to their teams, to their managers, and to their company. And then they need potential. They need the opportunity to leverage their strengths, to have the coaching and the guidance that will help them improve and build upon those strengths so that they can not only have impact in their current role, but they want to know how they can continue to impact the organization and how they can grow in their role and in their company. Now, on the flip side, managers have needs as well. They need clarity. They need the visibility into their team's performance, the full body of their work, how they're engaging and how they're driving outcomes, what their priorities are and what they're working on, and the progress that they're making. But they don't need it in a micromanagement style way. They just need access to understand what's happening holistically. Because without that holistic point of view, they aren't able to be effective as a manager responsible for the results and the performance of their team members. They need capacity. I talk to managers who manage anywhere from 15 to 20 individuals, and I've heard even higher numbers than that. It's nearly impossible when you have that many direct reports to do a good job as a manager, especially if you're operating in an environment with outdated tools and processes and just wildly unrealistic expectations. Many managers have individual contributor responsibilities as well. There's a difference between being hands-on in an organization and being underwater. And we have put many of our managers in the situation of throwing them in at the deep end without a life preserver and no training to teach them how to swim. And they need confidence. They need to know that they can access the tools and the training and the support so that they can do their best for their people. Management is not an easy role and it doesn't come naturally for everyone. And so helping them understand how they can best bring out their own capabilities, but also the capabilities of their team, puts them in a position to do what the company expects of them, which is to deliver results. The two most powerful tools that a manager has are recognition and guidance. And those are really two sides of the same coin. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about both of these and how they fit together, because this is really the key to unlocking the potential that your managers have. So recognition is a way to reinforce what good looks like. So public recognition in particular that is timely and personal actually has employees feel seen and has the added benefit when it's visible of having other employees and managers see what's going on in the workplace. So recognition is most powerful when it's not just top down, when it's actually an element of the culture where every employee is unleashed to recognize others showing up at their best. Because managers alone have some blinders in what they can see, not because they intentionally want to, but they cannot be everywhere. So recognition is a very powerful way to surface the work that matters and the work that is having impact and to demonstrate to everyone what good looks like. So recognition needs to be high quality. It needs to be done right. It needs to be personal, specific, timely, tied to impact, tied to company values. So you see people actually living the company values through the work that they're doing, and absolutely has to be visible. Guidance, on the other hand, helps to build clarity and trust and continuous improvement. Guidance comes in the form of regular coaching. This is not in the sense of critiquing. Sorry, that didn't come out very well, but more so from the perspective of how to help people recognize the small adjustments that they could make to be more effective. Guidance like recognition needs to come in the moment when you see the opportunity or the need, not a month later or a week later or a year later in the annual performance review. Guidance is effective when it is delivered very specifically in the moment where it can impact the outcome, where it's clear and it's actionable, but it has to be rooted in trust. And we'll talk in a few minutes about how you build the trust to create an environment of constructive feedback where that feedback is taken and actioned. So guidance can be delivered in the moment in a well-run one-on-one, not just when things go wrong, but also optimizing for what could be even better. You may be effective at something, but if you can adjust in subtle ways, you may be wildly more effective. As a coach, the manager can actually identify this and help the employee recognize how to become even more effective. So it's not about catching people doing something wrong. It's about identifying what they can adjust that has them be more effective. All right, so at Bonusly, we believe that there are three critical relationships in the workplace: the relationship between the company and the employee, employees with each other, and managers and their teams. Now, this webinar is really focused on that manager and team member relationship and how to make that most productive. But I don't want to ignore the foundation that is necessary to support those managers and their teams in reaching their full potential. It starts with the company and the relationship between the company and employees. So I mentioned earlier, people are much more demanding these days in the workplace around aligning with something that they believe in. It's important that people are seeking out roles with companies where they align to the vision, where they have shared values, where they feel a part of something bigger than themselves. The manager and employee relationship alone will not create a thriving, highly productive team. It is a critical element, but the company building relationship with and aligning with employees is very critical. And so being clear about vision, mission, values, ensuring that your selection processes assess for those, that those are evaluated in the ongoing coaching and recognized in the recognition that is provided, like flagged back to those values that are important to the company. That's how you create a strong culture. And then unlocking employees and their ability to catch people at their best. The people who know best what individuals are doing are the people working with them day in and day out. And so when you empower people with a culture of recognition that is visible and immediate and tied to company values and core initiatives that the company is driving, you unlock the ability to surface and celebrate the work that matters. That peer recognition actually is a critical component to a manager's visibility into the full body of work and the way that an individual is showing up. Otherwise, a manager will only see a small sliver of that. So that public visibility on that peer-to-peer recognition is truly critical to creating the visibility that empowers managers to be able to be effective with their team members in both providing recognition and reinforcement for what is working, as well as guiding, helping to prioritize, and providing that feedback that will help them be even more effective. So the way that this works as a virtuous cycle is that recognition builds trust. When people feel like you are out to catch them at their best and you're celebrating when they've worked hard, when they've achieved a particular objective, when they've shown up and lived the company values, they know that they are seen and valued for that. That builds trust. Trust enables people to accept constructive feedback and guidance much more naturally because there is a sense and a belief that the people around them are truly rooting for them and they are seen holistically, not just for a single element that they may be getting coaching or guidance on. The openness to that coaching and guidance and that proactive nature of providing that then drives higher performance because you are providing feedback to people in the moment when it matters, when they can actually have impact on outcomes. So those better outcomes actually lead to more moments of recognition that build more trust. And so in that way, it's like a snowball effect, but it's a really positive snowball effect where you build more and more momentum over time through really investing in providing that recognition publicly and consistently, and then pairing that with the guidance that helps people optimize their impact on the business. All right, so you probably would like to be able to take something back to your workplaces today to begin to have impact. And so this next section is just for that. We put together a playbook of really 3 ways that you can begin to really invest in setting up your managers to be the multipliers in the workplace that they have the potential of being. So recognition is truly critical to this process. And it's not just nice words. It's not the atta girls and atta boys. Yes, there is a place for, great job or thank you. But what's really important is that you enable people to provide recognition in the right way, where it's specific, where it's more storytelling. It is explicit about how someone showed up or what they did that had impact on the business, how they live the values, how they align to key company objectives. When you deliver recognition in that way, it is a signal. It is flagging the work that matters. It is flagging the work that has impact for the business. And it is telling everyone, not only is that individual doing a great job, but also this is what good looks like. So it creates awareness for what good work looks like across the organization. That actually takes pressure off of leaders and managers when you unlock this within your teams and make this a very visible process for your organization. A great manager changes everything. So 70% of employee engagement is dependent on the individual manager. When we say managers can be multipliers, if you invest in your managers, if you set them up for success, provide them the training, make sure that they have reasonable expectations around workload, help them prioritize, help them with the challenging situations, that will pay off in spades because they will be replicating that across each of their team members. And that creates a thriving, high performing team that you can count on to sustainably improve the business and the outcomes. And then finally, that ongoing commitment to providing recognition as well as guidance or coaching, setting up your managers for success, ensuring that managers and their teams are meeting regularly, are talking about the right things, aren't mailing it in as a status update for the one-on-one, or worse, consistently canceling that, then you are providing feedback in the moment, which helps to improve performance over time, which means that you are actually um, building upon a great foundation of performance over time and continuing to raise the bar. That is how you actually drive a thriving, high performing team and enable your managers to show up at their best, which then has a multiplier effect on their teams. So, just to sum up, what you can do um, to really flip the script today is spotlighting recognition, elevating recognition quality, making wins visible, make sure that the recognition is specific and tied to what matters most, which is critical. You need to make sure that people understand the values in the organization, what it means to live a particular value, and that way the recognition is actually reinforcing the culture that you intend to build in the company. Support your managers. What is one concrete change that you can make to improve the quality of life of your managers? If you're not sure, or if the list is really long, ask them explicitly this question: what is one change that we can make that would improve the quality of life for you as a manager? And take their feedback. And then help your managers to redefine their one-on-ones. Many people have never been trained on what a good one-on-one or check-in looks like. Show your managers what that looks like. Shift from status reports to growth conversations. Ensure that you're incorporating in every one-on-one meeting relationship building and checking in with the human, not just the employee. And when you do these three things, you will begin to set the cycle in motion to really develop your managers to be multipliers, to cultivate and nurture high performing teams who are highly engaged and who really truly make work better for the rest of the team. So Megan, I have not been watching the Q&A whatsoever or the chat. So you'll have to help me out here.
No problem. I'm happy to help out. I do want to say, everyone in the chat, everyone, thank you so much for attending. You are very engaged in the chat, sharing a lot of your own experiences and lots of agreement of what you said, Deborah. There was one comment by Ahmad that said something about sprinkling in engagement and recognition, and a little bit of Deborah wisdom is the key to management success. And I just love that comment. And then another person had an observation that said at their specific workplace, their top performing managers all happen to be pet owners, which I thought was very interesting.
Maybe selection criteria going forward.
I would love to see the stats on that, and because I could see how compassion of animals could maybe apply to compassion of humans. Who knows? But
Yes.
I do encourage you all to connect with Deborah. She has a ton of great resources and information on her LinkedIn page as well. So definitely check out Deborah on LinkedIn. And if you would like to speak further with someone from Bonusly, a representative, we will get you connected happily with a representative from Bonusly if you answer yes to the poll question that you see here on your screen. Again, Bonusly is a great organization. We do a lot of work with Bonusly. We're happy to partner with them on a lot of events, and they're just really great group of humans and people that care about everyone performing well at work. So I highly encourage you to reach
Aw.
out to them. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Megan. May I just share, one, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I do share a ton of content, and I've spent my whole career focused on making work better. I started out as an in-house HR practitioner for the first decade of my career back in the 90s. So before FMLA and ADA were even enacted, if you can believe that. Yeah, that it's been a long time, but what I'm really passionate about is helping HR teams to make work better, and I get to do that here at Bonusly. We we really believe that the key to high performance is really unlocking the potential of individuals and their teams. And so Bonusly's product is really built around nurturing those three critical relationships in the workplace: company to employee, employees with each other, and managers and their teams.
Excellent. And I do want to get through some of these questions. And I thought
Yes.
one thing that you said that was phenomenal, because I feel like you might have been listening to a phone conversation I had earlier today with a colleague of mine about loneliness at work. Um, this particular attendee said, you stated that HBR says workplace loneliness is an epidemic. Do you feel that this is mitigated by a return to work, or is it made worse? Has return to work made it worse, or has it had no impact? Or do you have any idea of maybe where the source of that workplace loneliness is coming from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel strongly that proximity does not create a sense of connectedness. Now, I do. Some people prefer to be physically around others. Other people do not. So I think flexibility, from my perspective, is really important, and people recognizing what works for them and aligning to companies that support that. But part of being having a sense of connectedness is working with people who you can build relationships with, who you can get to know. So in some cases, that can happen in a workplace where you can have a chit chat, as you're refilling your water or heating up your lunch, in the break room. But where that's not possible, and in companies that have distributed even locations, you have to create ways for people to see what's happening in the organization. I mentioned it's important for people to feel seen and valued as humans. Part of that relationship building in the workplace is going beyond just the work product and the projects that people are working on. And so celebrating things like making it safe and an actual celebration for people to share what's important to them, whether it's in the like the parent chat channel or the dog channel or the cat channel. If it's celebrating adopting a new puppy, or adopting a new human, or getting married, or getting unmarried, or buying a house. It's those milestones that are personal to you, that where the company like makes it really feasible for people to see what you're comfortable with sharing and celebrating that. And ensuring that in the world today, we go from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. You have to intentionally insert opportunities for people to connect on a human level that are not defined agenda driven connections. You have to create space on the calendars. You have to provide options for people to engage. Sometimes it's a meetup in a local hub. Sometimes it's a virtual coffee. Sometimes it's a virtual team building or events like a cooking class or learning to make pottery. We did that on the customer success team here at Bonusly not too long ago. I was not super effective, but I got to connect with my team. So the pottery is gone, but the team building remains. And so it's not about proximity. It's about the opportunities that you create to demonstrate that you value the humanness that your team members bring, that you're not only focused on outcomes and work product and, what they're working on, and that you have created the space for people to connect in ways that are comfortable for them, which requires optionality.
I want to ask a question about that. So there's a lot of mention about the different generations that are all sharing the workforce these days. How, and in some generations, even in mine, when we were younger, starting out earlier, we were always told, don't say anything personal to a manager, don't share anything personal with your coworkers, keep your cards to your chest, basically.
Mm-hmm.
How can you encourage sharing more of what's important to you with a manager, or even as a manager? How can you encourage your employees to share some of that personal information and have the confidence that they'll be respected, it won't be used against them, and that you're just asking to build a better relationship so you can help motivate and help cultivate their success?
Yeah, I think you have to start with being genuine organizationally. And look, not every workplace is one that welcomes like the personal side of things. So if you're in a workplace where it's not safe to do that, that's concerning in and of itself. And I wouldn't encourage people to do things that they're not comfortable with. I think you make it easy for people to share what they're comfortable sharing. I grew up in a time where you didn't share anything personal.
Mhm.
And it's taken me time to learn that if I don't show vulnerability and share about me, that my team won't do that with me either. So it's subtle things, and it has to start with leaders demonstrating that. And in larger companies, you have employee resource groups and culture committees and groups that make that part of the fabric of what the organization is doing to support that. But if your top leadership doesn't support and appreciate that, then that may not be the business to do it in. So I would never um, even pressure people to share what they're not comfortable with. But for me as a leader, and what I've shared with other leaders, is you need people on your team to realize that you're a real human and that you will bring that humanness to the workplace. So for me, people can see on my calendar when I have a doctor visit, or they may not know which doctor, but they see it's a doctor visit, or they see that I'm taking time out with my mom to take her to her doctor visit. I'm the primary caregiver for my elderly mom. That allows people to realize that I also have to find ways to like bring my life to work and my work to my life and manage all of that. That opens up conversations with people that unlock a connectedness that you can't force.
Mhm.
Um, they need to feel comfortable with that. So one of the ways that many people on my team are not caregivers for their parents, but they have small children or they have other family obligations. They see that I support that for myself, and they can open up and have conversations with me about that. That's a way that you can individually have that impact. But if I wasn't comfortable sharing something in my personal life, I I wouldn't put it on my calendar,
Right.
or I wouldn't be open about it. Another way is like, at different times of year, like October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I always share my story during that month with the
Mhm.
people at work, so they know if they ever have something like that going on, I might be a resource, or I might at least understand what they're going through. So you have to help your managers and your leaders um, understand the things that they can do to demonstrate that it's okay. And you need to train them how to navigate difficult conversations, because some do come up. So
And I want to recognize Taisha, who said, "Hey, Survivor sister, Deborah, glad you're doing well."
5.5 years out.
That's amazing. And I love your suggestions because you're giving enough personal information without oversharing, or maybe I know there's a lot of concern in the chat about people being concerned about anything being weaponized or used against you, but those little details speak volumes without giving a ton of information away. So I appreciate
Yeah.
those suggestions.
Yeah. You have to find the balance that works for you and also for your workplace. There are
Mhm.
workplaces where I might not have shared as much because the workplace didn't allow for it. So you have to be thoughtful about that. It's not something that you can force.
Definitely. I love this next question because I know that you will have a great resources for this. How Can you provide more details on a sample agenda for one-on-ones, or more effective one-on-ones, I should say?
Oh, yeah. So, first off, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'll send you like actual resources. You're getting what's off the top of my head. So think in terms of balancing the updates with the conversations that need to happen. First off, start every one-on-one with a check-in on how are you? How are you doing this week? But don't just make it about the team member, like share your how are you as the manager as well. There needs to be a connectedness on the human level between the manager and the team member. I may be having a bad week because my dog was up sick all night and I didn't get much sleep, or I may have something else going on. It's okay to actually like acknowledge, hey, I'm low energy. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing this week. I'm working on it, or I need help. So that needs to be a two-way conversation, and that's relationship building. Don't make the one-on-one about status updates. You can do an async inform section on your one-on-one document that are the status updates. You shouldn't have a one-on-one that could have been an email. The one-on-one is about the dialogue. So questions on, where do I need help? Where am I blocked? What input or feedback do I need? What questions do I have about company objectives? I would incorporate a healthy amount of dialogue and questions more so than the status updates, because the status updates are what they are. You can read those. And so think of it in terms of, what do I need to know? That's the inform section. How do we connect at the outset so we kind of understand where each other is, just energy wise and life wise, and then go into how can we help each other? And that's where your opportunities for coaching or recognition or happy birthday, are you doing anything fun for your birthday? Those kinds of conversations are what should be woven into the one-on-one.
I love it. Great suggestions. Two-pronged question here. First is, where do you feel you should start providing managers management training? So if a lot of the suggestions was to get managers trained, where should people start? Is there a specific
Yeah.
format to follow, certain type of protocol, certain modules? What do you think?
Yeah. So I think it depends. I have worked in large companies where there was budget and there was a full-on management curriculum and you had management trainers. I've worked in companies where there was no budget. And so I think where you start is dependent on who you are as a company and what you have access to. At a minimum, training people on the difficult conversations that can come up and how to respond in those difficult conversations. There's nothing worse than a manager being dumbfounded and not knowing what to say or being afraid to say anything when something difficult comes up. So absolutely train them on how to have difficult conversations and the kinds of conversations that come up that may surprise you, like you wouldn't have expected. Teach them about how to balance recognition with guidance and how you can provide coaching in the moment without it being a big, heavy like lift. Give them the tools to operate in the day to day. So, how do you recognize what somebody's strength is? How do you provide feedback that is specific and actionable and focused on the action or the task at hand? How to recognize what someone needs or when someone might be struggling. But you can do that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be through a classroom curriculum. There are a lot of great podcasts. There are a lot of resources in your company. You could do a manager roundtable or manager lunch and learn and have a leader, a more seasoned leader, talk through specific topics or make it safe for managers to submit questions in advance and just talk them out together. Developing and supporting your managers doesn't have to be this extensive management training curriculum, but it does require intentionality.
I love that suggestion about bringing in like a management subject matter expert, someone who's a successful manager, well respected, great performing team, and learning from their, successes and their case studies as well. I love that. What about on the flip side of that? What if you are providing this to managers and they're not taking advantage of these interventions or trainings that are provided?
That's a great question and a great challenge. That's generally so nobody takes a management role with the desire to not do a good job of it. And if people aren't participating in your programs, it's probably one of a couple different scenarios. One, they may not have capacity, like they may not be able to create the space, and you may have to help them with prioritization or creating the space in their calendar, in their day, so that they can participate. If they are the manager who thinks that they've got it all figured out, but they actually don't, like you've put these programs in place because of what you've seen in their organization, make sure that we're having the candid conversations with managers, that they know that there are areas that they could be more effective. Work with their leaders. It should not be an HR mandate for managers to attend training or to be developed. That's a leadership responsibility. So work with your senior leaders to set the expectations and tone for managers, building those skills and continuing to sharpen the saw, and have those leaders lead by example in showing up and participating in those sessions as well. We all have things that we can revisit, learn about, or relearn over time. And so it's all about setting the tone from a leadership perspective.
Excellent. I know you can answer this question for sure. In a team of 30 employees, what's the best way to show appreciation if they all like to be recognized differently?
Uh, well, so depending on what your situation is, like generally it's not 30 different examples of how they want to be recognized. But I would ensure that if you're using some internal chat, that you have a way of capturing wins. And maybe 30 donuts. I saw that comment. I like that idea. Um, Make sure that the team knows how to share openly and celebrate wins, and make it a part of your culture. So as it's happening, have them share in your chat. Like if you have Teams or if you have Slack, share it there. Have a win section at the beginning of team meetings and one-on-ones. Socialize those in multiple ways. But if people don't want to be called up to the front of the room to deliver a speech when they're getting a trophy, by all means, don't force them to do that. Mostly people, I see pizza also is a good idea. Sorry, I'm seeing the chat now. Mostly people are like concerned about being in the limelight. And some people are uncomfortable if they're spotlighted, but are happy to hear that recognition directly, or seeing it in an async channel where they don't have to be on the spot. So there are lots of ways that you can recognize people and create a culture of recognition that is still respectful of individual preferences.
I think so. A couple of months ago, I'm not sure if it was you or another bonusly employee suggested that we ask our employees, like, how do you
Yep.
prefer to be recognized? And I did that with my own team, and it's been so helpful. It's been insightful because it helped build that personal relationship, but also it made sure I didn't embarrass anybody or make people feel uncomfortable. And so, thank you for that suggestion. We take your advice very seriously.
I love that.
Um, I wanted to ask you this question from Tyler Jensen. So it's how would you suggest you work with leadership about scope or headcount for newer managers? And he expanded on that question by saying the headcount for newer managers who are learning to manage within the company, not increasing level and scope until mastery is demonstrated. How do you set that up for your new managers?
Yeah, so we've done that in a couple of different ways. And one of the ways is developing kind of a lead or a player coach type approach where you give people 2 or 3 individuals. So not a full um, responsibility as a manager, but you give them a manager mentor in the process. So they get more hands-on support from a seasoned manager to help them in building those capabilities. But they have fewer individuals that they're directly managing. And for the first, 6, 9, 12 months, that mentor manager may engage in some of the team meetings and individual one-on-ones, support with key conversations like performance reviews and whatnot, where that newer manager will have fewer direct reports, may have their own, day-to-day responsibilities as well. Um, but they're building those skills with a guide along the way. Um, if they're a new manager in the company, but not new to managing, Generally, what we've seen is they may have a smaller number of direct reports while they're getting up to speed on company culture, company values, what good looks like at this particular company, and then their team may grow thereafter.
Excellent. Well, Deborah, I hate to say that we are out of time, but I loved this conversation. We loved your presentation, lots of excellent feedback in the audience chat. And we also want to thank our attendees for your engagement today. Today's activity ID is 716783. Again, 716783, and this has been approved for 1 HR credit. Deborah, thank you so much again for bringing your expertise and your knowledge here to us today. We hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks, team. I
Have a good
enjoyed it.